Hi everyone in EDUC902. I'm sorry this is a little bit late. I really wanted to make a video and kind of summarize all the things that we had talked about in our individual meetings a little bit earlier than this. But like you, I've kind of been waylaid. I've been a little bit under the weather for the last couple of days, especially yesterday. So I'm feeling better and I've caught up on reading all of the discussion board posts, and I believe I've gotten to just about everyone's outline. I've also had a lot of individual contact with some of you, not as much with some of you, and that's okay. So I wanted to summarize a few things that we have gone over, and I have a lot of insights now into where everyone is, both in terms of the process of where you are with all of your writing and your researching, but also psychologically where you all are. And I wanted to go over a few things and encapsulate a few things that we had talked about and summarize some things. Some of these we've already gone over. Some of us have spoken extensively about these things, and with others of you, we either didn't hit on all of the points, or I feel like I need to hone in and underline and underscore and bold and italicize some of the things that we talked about. The thing that I want to do really most of all is to reiterate again. I know that some of you are progressing along great, and some of you are really frustrated with yourselves. And I want to let everyone know that none of you should be frustrated with yourself right now. I had said at the beginning that wherever you were when you began this process and began this class was fine, and I meant it. And wherever you are right now in this process is fine, and I mean that. One of the things that we really need to focus on is sort of refocusing our expectations of what is going to get accomplished in what amount of time. Some of you are feeling like you're having to even go back to the drawing board. Some of you are, in fact, having to go back to the drawing board. And so you feel like everything that you've done up until now is for naught. Or you feel like you've hit a roadblock, or you feel like you've done as much as you can possibly do with everything that you have now, and you don't know how to get started even more from there. You don't know how to restart. And I just want to let you know that it is normal to feel that way. It's a very lonely process. There's a couple of you who have shared with me that you had even some breakdowns. And so if you're one of those people, you are not alone. There are other people who are feeling just as frustrated and just as much as if they've hit a wall. So I think that there's a couple of tips that I can give you right now. But number one, you have to give yourself a break. And I've said that to a few of you before. Number two, you really have to be okay with wherever you are in the process, and I'm okay with wherever you are in the process. So for those of you who are worried about your points, you're worried about your assignments, you don't know whether or not you did a detailed enough outline, or if your 4.2 worksheet wasn't exactly right. For right now, with the tools that we're doing, there is no right or wrong. There will be a right or wrong when you turn in drafts of your Chapter 1, 2, and 3, when you go before your committee and you want to actually defend your proposal. There are some right ways and some wrong ways to do it. For now, we're not talking about right or wrong. We're not talking about 30 points versus 50 points. We're not talking about pass versus fail, any of that kind of stuff. So I want to take the pressure off in terms of the points and in terms of the assignments right now for you, because again, wherever you are is fine. If you only have an outline that has Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and that's it, that's okay. If you have a 3-page detailed outline that has your sub ABC and the 1, 2, 3 and the points underneath that, and you're filling them in and you're working along with that, that's okay too. So I want to take the pressure off in terms of the points. The other thing I want to let you all know is that while this class is set up to provide an opportunity for you to finish your chapters 1, 2, and 3 in terms of a good solid working draft of all 3 of those chapters of your dissertation, the truth is most of you are not really actually going to accomplish that before the end of this class. That too is okay. Some of you are very relieved to hear that. You're very happy to hear that. You already knew that and you thought that and you are validated by that. And others of you feel like I'm punching you in the gut when I say that. And I don't mean it to be a punch in the gut. It's just the way it is. It is not possible, even if you're off work and even if you're spending 24/7 on your dissertation, just the nature of what it is that you're trying to accomplish and how much it is that you're trying to do, even in an 8-week time frame when all you're doing is this for 24/7, it's just not going to happen. You're not going to walk out of this class with a completely finished, ready to defend proposal. A couple of you are closer than others in terms of that kind of finished product. Some of you have been working for an entire year more than others of you. Some of you have been able to devote more time and don't have a full-time job outside of the scope of this, or you have the summer off, where others of you are still working full-time during the summer. So while it's good to have a support network and it's good to collaborate with each other, I want you to try to resist too much comparing where you are necessarily to someone else, because there are so many different variables involved with the level of progress that you have. So I want you to understand that it's okay to extend your timeline. It's okay to extend your expectations. And what I don't want you to do is sort of freak out about, well, I'm not even really sure that I have a solid, take on my outline of the literature review, but yet I'm supposed to move on to looking at materials about chapter 3, and I don't even have my hands around chapter 2 yet. And so how am I supposed to have chapter 1, 2, and 3 completely done in a few weeks? And the answer is you're not. It's okay. It's okay. I am much more concerned with you going through the process in a way that makes sense for you, that takes into account all of the things that you have going on in your life, takes into account the challenges that you may have had with your topic, takes into account how much literature you've been able to find, whether or not you've been able to really get a good direction on your methodology or not. There's so many different things that go into where you are in this right now. And so that's okay. Most of you right now need to just focus on the content of your literature review, the content of chapter 2. Chapter 1 is going to change. It will at some point end up being a nice summarized package of everything else that's in your dissertation. Before all is said and done, your chapter 1 is going to be a summary of sorts of chapters 2 through 5 or 2 through 6, depending on how many chapters you end up with in your dissertation. And so it will change. You do need to have a draft of chapter 1. You have to have a general direction about where you're going to go. You have to have some general research questions that guide what you do in your literature review. And you need to have at least a few different ideas about how you might go about gathering data to answer those questions. But in terms of you going back right now, before you move on to chapter 2, and tying chapter 1 up in a nice, neat little bow, neat little package with a red bow, it doesn't make sense for you to do that. So most of you need to be focusing on chapter 2. Get an outline of chapter 2, which most of you have done. Not everybody is there yet, but most of you have at least an outline of chapter 2. You've begun researching. You have sectioned it out, and those sections are going to change and grow also. I'm going to use Anne as an example. She usually doesn't mind, and she sort of puts herself out there when it comes to those kinds of things, and you've probably seen a little bit of the feedback. She is dealing with a monster in terms of the concepts and the philosophical construct and the basis of what it is that she's trying to talk about. She's trying to get her hands around the concept of altruism and whether or not it makes teachers more successful. What effect does an altruistic philosophy and an altruistic teaching style have in the classroom? That's a monster. She needed to give herself the luxury of scholarship. Read about that. Go back into the philosophical basis of this idea of altruism and how is it contrasted with some other concepts and philosophies. And not only that, but then is there a body of literature that ties this philosophy specifically to education? And if not, are there some other areas where, she can branch out and take a look at and then explore and then apply? that takes a lot of time. You know, she needed to give herself the time and the luxury of really getting in the literature. Now that she's done that, she's taking a little bit of a different direction, a very good direction, actually. And so her outline is going to change a little bit. Her literature review is going to change a little bit. She's already rethinking what she originally thought she was going to do as methodology. All of that is fantastic. All of that is progress. So while at times Anne might feel like, and others of you who may be in a similar boat might feel like that's not progress, you think, oh my gosh, I thought I had it figured out, and now I'm kind of going back to the drawing board, and I'm wondering again, and now I'm going off in this direction and that direction. You are making progress. That is what you should be doing. That is exactly what you should be doing. And it will happen to everyone. And that's why this idea of trying to sit down and write in a completed way, or in such a structured way that you end up with point A to point B to point C to point D to point E. Okay, I'm in and out. I'm done. Let's move on. It just isn't going to happen. That's why this is bigger than one single project. It's why it's bigger than one single, 5 to 10 page paper. Think back to the very first time someone told you you had to write a 10 to 15 page paper. I remember the first time I was told to write a 30-page paper. It was in my first class in my PhD program. And I had commuted to Manhattan. And on my drive home, it took the entire 2 hours for me to go, what the heck am I doing? And why did I start this program? I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. I'm trying to teach. I just finished up my master's. I don't know what I'm doing. And this joker who gave me absolutely no direction whatsoever, and he really was a joker. If you think it's different at K-State and Southwestern College, you're wrong. It's not. It gave me absolutely no structure whatsoever and wanted me to write a 30-page paper. And I thought, are you kidding me? So think back to where you were then. It's the same kind of thing. You could pop out a 10-page paper tomorrow if I asked you to, or a 15 or a 20-page paper, and it really wouldn't even seem like it was that big of a deal if you had, a topic that you had to do. If I said, write me a 10-page paper right now on, the history of educational reform in secondary education, Shelley Hoffman, I'm throwing you a bone because I know that's what you're going to do in part of your literature review. But if I told you all to do that, you would know where to start, where to go. You understand what educational reform is, that you need to define it, and you would be able to outline and write a 10 to 15 page paper in a day and a half, if that's the amount of time you had to focus on, to write that kind of paper. That isn't what you're doing with your literature review. You aren't writing one, 10 to 15 page paper. It's not what you're doing. You have to rethink what you're doing, and you have to understand that it is a process, and that it takes time, and that you're going to stop and start, and all of those kinds of things. So I know I've talked a lot, like I always do, stream of consciousness and never shut up, but I'm really trying to underscore this because there are many of you who really need to hear this right now. So let me see what else is on my list and take a little breath, which I only do every once in a while. Let's see. Use the tools, but don't let them paralyze you. The intention is not for worksheets 4.1, 4.2, 4.3. You have a 5.1, coming up in Module 3. You have some other tools that your classmates have shared with you. There are some web-based tools. There's a lot of resources that are sort of flying around out there. There's a lot of guidelines. I'm throwing even more resources at you in Module 2. The idea is not for them to overwhelm you, but is to provide you with, a toolkit. If they are overwhelming you, or if you are allowing those tools to paralyze you, or as a few of you, again, you're not alone. If you're somebody who has said, I'm getting different things from your materials and from other people and even from our 2 textbooks. I get into Creswell, I feel like he says one thing. I watch the video, I feel like it says another. Don't let those things paralyze you. Some things work for some people and don't for others. If you feel like you have too much in front of you, you have Creswell, at you, and Cratwell and Smith at you, and now you have this video of Jenny at you, and you have all of these different things at you, and you want to, put a voodoo pin stick in the back of my neck right now, then what you need to do is just take a step back and stop looking at Creswell and stop looking at Crathwell and Smith and turn me off, okay? And instead sit down and calm down. And there's two tools that I can tell you that work, or they worked for me. They worked for me when I got to that point, and I got to that point about 5 or 6 different times when I thought I really wanted to murder somebody, and I mean like break down, kind of. I cannot do this, kind of a thing. I'm not talking about daily frustrations. I'm talking about I don't think I'm ever going to finish my PhD. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to get through this committee. I don't feel like I'm ever going to be able to take another piece of contradictory advice, or another time somebody tells me I need to go back to the drawing board for something, or go do some more research on something without murdering somebody. I can remember back to 5 or 6 distinct times when I felt like I hit that wall. And I'm here helping you through the process now, and so I'm an example of how you can do that and you can still get there. So I hope that inspires you, and it doesn't serve to overwhelm you a little bit more. That's the intention anyway. But anyway, there's 2 things. One is make a list of the tedious things that you can take care of. Things like working on your reference list, things like editing, the things that you have done right now. Studies that you need to read, but they maybe seem like they're a little bit off point, so you kind of put them off to the side. Anything that's kind of, if you hit a wall, something where you feel like you can make some progress, make a list of those things, or get a little, like an inbox type thing, where the things that you don't have to do right now, an APA format source, some kind of source or form that you have to fill out that's for IRB, anything that you can think of that you can put in this, I don't have to do this right now pile, but I'm going to have to do it at some point pile. Put that in a box somewhere, so that when you hit a wall, you can at least go to that box and pull out something, so you feel like you're making some progress. The other thing is, when you feel like you've hit a wall when it comes to writing, try free writing. And for those of you who aren't really familiar with it, or don't really remember exactly what that's like from a writing class, it's just sit down and write. And it could be writing or it could be typing. It depends on the kind of person you are. But imagine that you have a friend that has sat down to have a cup of coffee with you and has said, tell me about what you're doing with your dissertation. And you say, I am researching the difference in learning outcomes between an online class and a face-to-face class in college. And they say, oh, wow, that's really interesting. I've taken face-to-face classes and online classes. What have you found out so far about what the difference is? Imagine that sort of conversation, and what would you say to someone if they were sitting across from you and they were asking you about it? Even if all you do is write in a conversational way or type in a conversational way to get your head around what it is that you're doing. Even if you've already finished that section of your literature review, anything that gets those juices flowing is better than nothing. Again, I want you to get away from the idea that you have to sit down and write in a finished form. And the reason I'm honing in on that is because I'm one of those people who normally will sit down, and as I'm writing something, it takes form, and I don't have to go back and edit and revise a whole lot, and I can be pretty, A, B, C, D, E, F, G in what I'm writing. I would not be able, even though I've done a dissertation, I've read several dissertations, working now with a bunch of people who are in different stages of their dissertations, I would not be able to take any single one of the topics that you all have chosen and sit down and write a literature review in a finished form, even if you handed me all of your research. It's just the nature of what it is that you're trying to do. It doesn't lend itself to that kind of process. So for those of you who are used to being able to do that, you're going to be more frustrated than those of you who are okay with everything not necessarily being tied up in a nice, neat package with a red bow around it. You know, so just think about, try to use that tip of, if I were just sitting down in conversation, what would I say to somebody? You can even videotape yourself if you want to. If you're an external person who has, a case of verbal diarrhea like I do, where I just have to like, blah, and get it out there, do it on video if you have to. I don't care. Whatever you have to do to feel like you're getting your hands around your topic. Just free write, free talk, free video, whatever. Move some things around. Just take a study that you've read 3 times, and I don't care, read it again. Whatever you need to do to put that sometimes it's a step that you take in a day, and sometimes it's a tiny bit of a toe that you put forward. And sometimes, you might even take a jump in one day. But you're going to have days where you make progress, and you're going to have days where you don't make progress. And again, that's okay. So to sum up 20 minutes of stream of consciousness thinking, and you're welcome for those of you who are saying thank you for getting to the conclusion. Basically, focus on chapter 2. Don't try to get chapter 1 all tied up in a nice, neat little bow. Recognize that you are going to change the things that you do. You're going to go back to the things that you do. Your sections are going to change around, your outline is going to change around. And even as you move on to module 3 in terms of the materials that you're covering for this class, I really want you to focus on chapter 2 right now. For this particular class, I want your literature review to be thorough. And in order to do it thoroughly, you have to research it and give yourself the luxury of scholarship. You can move ahead a little bit to the research methods, and I want you to spend some time, looking at those things when we get to module 3. But for the bulk of this class, I want you to focus on the luxury of scholarship and being in the literature that you are right now. Okay. Now, I want to have a class collaboration session, which I'm going to set up. And I'm going to require you all to have viewed this video before we do that. So there'll be an announcement to that regard, and then it'll be time for us to meet individually again. In the meantime, give yourself the luxury of scholarship, work on your literature review, and let me know if you have any questions. Happy writing, happy researching, happy pillow punching.